In the small village of Nsumba, there lived a girl named Balinol. She had the brightest smile and the kindest heart. Everyone in the village loved her because she helped the elders, played with the children, and brought laughter wherever she went. Her mother, Lindai, was a soft-spoken woman who worked hard every day. She sold vegetables at the market and taught Balinol how to cook, how to heal wounds with herbs, and how to sing songs to calm the spirit. When Balinol was 10 years old, her life changed. Her mother married a man named Duma, a tall and strong man with cold eyes. At first, Duma acted like a good man. He brought home meat, fixed the roof of their house, and even gave Balinol sweets. But soon, everything changed. Once the wedding beads were taken off, Duma's true face showed itself. He was not kind. He shouted at Lindai. He hit her when she spoke too softly. He threw food when it wasn't hot enough. And when Balinol tried to protect her mother, Duma looked at her with a stare that froze her bones. From that day, Balinol stayed silent. She kept her head down and tried to avoid his anger. But it was not enough. Duma began to hate her. He said she looked too much like her father, the man Lindai had loved before. A man who died mysteriously while fishing alone. Duma said Balinol was a curse. He said her laughter brought misfortune. Slowly, Balinol stopped smiling. The villagers noticed the change, but no one dared to speak against Duma. He was too strong. He was feared. And he had friends in the chief's house. Then came the day that changed everything. Balinol was 14. She was fetching water from the river when she saw a child fall into the current. Without thinking, she jumped in and saved the boy. But when she came back home wet and muddy, Duma was waiting. He didn't care that she had saved a life. He said she was trying to bring attention to herself. That she was trying to outshine him. He dragged her inside the house and locked the door. The next morning, the neighbors heard screams. They knocked on the door, but Duma said everything was fine. When the door finally opened, Balinol was lying on the ground. Her legs were broken. Duma said she fell down the stairs. But there were no stairs in their house. Lindai cried and begged for help, but no one came. The chief's guard said it was a family matter. The healer was paid to say the girl was cursed. And so, Balinol lay in bed, in pain, her dreams shattered, her body broken. Days turned into weeks. Balinol couldn't walk. Her legs were twisted. Her mother tried to treat her with herbs and oils, but the damage was deep. Duma never apologized. He never helped. He only smiled when she cried, and sometimes whispered, "This is what happens when a girl speaks too much." But even in pain, Balinol's mind grew stronger. She began to see things she had never noticed before. She watched how Duma came and went. How he carried secret packages. How he whispered to a woman near the river. How he brought strange leaves home, which he burned at night while speaking words in a tongue she didn't understand. One night, when Duma was out, her mother whispered, "He's not just cruel. He is hiding something. I think he made a deal with the forest spirits." Balinol blinked. Her heart pounded. Deals with spirits were forbidden. The ancestors warned against using dark paths for power. But those who craved strength often disobeyed. Lindai leaned closer and said, "I think he's trying to become a village elder. And he's using blood to get there." That night, as Balinol lay in the darkness, she made a promise to herself. She would not die broken. She would not be forgotten. She would heal. She would learn. And when the time came, she would return the pain Duma gave her, but tenfold. The wind whispered through the cracks in the mud walls. It felt like the spirits had heard her vow. Balinol lay on the mat day and night, staring up at the same cracked ceiling. Her legs were useless now, stiff and weak like dry sticks. She could not stand. She could not walk. Her mother had to carry her even just to move her into the sun. Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. The seasons changed, but Balinol's world stayed the same. The pain in her legs was one thing. But worse than that was the pain in her heart. She remembered how she used to run through the village fields, laughing, racing the wind. She used to dance. She used to sing. All of that had been taken from her in one moment. Her stepfather had broken her body, and with it, tried to break her spirit. But inside the quiet, inside the long silences, something began to shift. She began to watch the world closely. She listened to the birds. She studied the movement of ants near her sleeping mat. She counted the stars at night and began keeping a record of how many times the moon changed its face. Even though her body couldn't move much, her mind became sharper every day. Like a hunter's spear. Her mother, Lindai, never gave up. Every morning, she boiled herbs. She fed Balinol with her hands. She sang to her even when her own eyes were swollen from crying. And when the sun was not too strong, she would lift Balinol in her arms and carry her outside to lie under the mango tree. There, the air was fresher. The leaves whispered above. And sometimes, Balinol could pretend she was part of the world again. One afternoon, a woman passed by on the narrow village path. She was not like the others. Her skin was dark and wrinkled like old bark, but her eyes were bright and strange. She wore beads of many colors, reds, greens, deep blues, and walked with a tall stick carved with symbols. She stopped near the tree and looked at Balinol. "You will walk again," she said simply. But not with anger. With wisdom. Then she turned and walked away, leaving only her words behind. Balinol's heart beat faster. She asked her mother that night, who was that woman? Her mother looked around before answering. That was Mazembe. A powerful healer. But the elders called her a witch. She left the village many years ago after they tried to burn her hut. They feared what she knew. After that, Mazembe began to visit. She came quietly, always during the early morning when the rooster crowed. She never knocked, never spoke at first. She brought strange-smelling oils, dark leaves, and little bags filled with ashes and stone. She began to rub Balinol's legs with mixtures that made her scream. The pain was deep, sharp. Sometimes it made her cry until she was shaking. "Pain is the fire that bends iron," Mazembe said. Over time, Balinol began to feel little sparks in her legs. A twitch in her toe. A flutter in her calf. Hope came back like a slow-growing flame. She began to learn more from Mazembe. Not just healing herbs, but secret things. How to mix roots to protect yourself. How to read dreams. How to know when someone's spirit was heavy with lies. She taught Balinol how to quiet her own thoughts until she could hear the hum of the ground. She learned how to use mirrors to catch spirits, and how to burn certain powders that would reveal truth in smoke. Still, every day, she trained. Slowly, painfully, she taught herself to sit up. Then to balance on her hands. Then to crawl across the floor. Her arms became strong like ropes. Her hands became hard like stones. And then, one night, when the moon was full, she stood. She stood on shaking legs, heart pounding, sweat pouring from her skin. But she stood. Her mother gasped when she saw her. She dropped her water pot and fell to her knees, crying. "You're standing. Balinol, you're standing." But Balinol didn't cry. She just looked at the moon. Her eyes burned with quiet fire. Duma, her stepfather, didn't notice anything. He had changed. He walked around the village with a prideful chest, trying to talk to the elders like he was one of them. He wore new red cloths and beaded necklaces that he had never earned. He bragged that the chief had invited him to meetings. Balinol heard whispers that he was seeking power, that he had begun visiting the river at night, talking to dark spirits. She knew he was planning something. One night, she heard him arguing with Lindiwe. His voice was loud. He was angry. He blamed her for everything. He said she was unlucky. He said she had brought shame to the home. That night, he beat her badly. Balinol crawled from her mat. She reached her mother too late. Lindiwe was lying on the floor, bruised, her mouth bleeding. She had tried to fight back. But Duma was cruel. Crueler than before. And when Balinol looked into his eyes the next day, she didn't see a man anymore. She saw something else, something dark and empty. The next morning, Duma packed a bag. He said he was leaving for a spiritual journey. He said he would return stronger, blessed by the gods. But Balinol knew better. That night, she went to Mazembe and said, "I'm ready." Mazembe looked into her eyes for a long time, then nodded. "Then your real path begins now." Together, they packed a small bag. Roots, powders, mirrors, a sharp bone knife hidden in cloth. They smeared ash on her face and tied charms to her arms. She was no longer just a girl. She was something else now. Before she left, Balinol kissed her mother's forehead. "I'll return," she said, "but not as the girl I was." Then, in the darkness, she slipped into the forest, stronger, wiser, with fire in her steps. She was no longer broken. She was becoming the storm. The forest was thick and alive. Balinol moved through it like a shadow, careful not to disturb the animals or spirits that lived among the trees. The night sounds no longer scared her. The rustling of leaves, the howl of a faraway hyena, the hoot of an owl, they became her music. She walked slowly but with purpose. Her legs still ached, but they were hers again, and they carried her now, step by step, deeper into the wild. She was headed toward the sacred hill where the ancestors whispered. Mazembe had told her of a place beyond the forest, hidden behind a wall of stone and vines. It was a forbidden ground, known only to those who walked between worlds. That was where Balinol would find the truth. That was where the spirits would answer. On the third day, just as the sky was turning red with dawn, she found it. It was quiet there, unnaturally so. Even the birds refused to sing. Thick vines curled around broken statues. The air smelled of salt and ashes. At the center of it all stood a hut, half covered in moss, its door swaying open. She stepped inside, heart pounding. A fire was already burning. And beside it sat a woman, blindfolded, with skin pale as milk and hair white like river foam. Her hands moved over a large bowl filled with bones and red stones. She did not look up, but she spoke in a voice like dried leaves. "You've come too late to stop his rise," the woman said. Balinol stood frozen. "Who are you?" "I was once a daughter, like you," the woman said, stirring the bowl. "And like you, I was betrayed by blood. My father sold me to a spirit for cattle. I died that day, but something stayed. Something waited." Balinol's lips trembled. "My stepfather broke my legs. He tried to destroy me." "No," said the woman. "He tried to use you." She reached into the fire and pulled out a bone wrapped in cloth. "Your body was the gate. Your pain opened it." Balinol stepped closer. "What are you saying?" The blind woman turned her head slowly, as if seeing through her bandages. "Duma did not break your legs out of rage. He did it as part of a ritual. He needed a daughter's bones, blood, and silence to awaken something old, something buried beneath this village." Balinol's knees weakened. She sat slowly on the floor, breath shaking. "He said I was cursed. That I brought shame. He lied. He needed your suffering. And now he's gone to finish the second part." "What second part?" "He must spill blood at the sacred stone during the harvest moon. It will give him power beyond any chief, any warrior. If he completes it, he cannot be stopped by man alone. Balinol was silent. Her fingers dug into the dirt. Her teeth clenched. I have to stop him. You cannot do it alone, the woman said. She reached into a pouch and pulled out a small black feather, a drop of red clay, and a string of cowrie shells. She placed them in Balinol's palm. These will guide you. But listen closely, child, this is no longer about revenge. It's about balance. If you fail, the village won't just suffer. It will rot. Balinol stood slowly. Her mind burned with everything she had just heard. She thought of her mother's bruised face. Of the screams in the night. Of her broken bones. And now, she saw something bigger, an evil not just of a man, but of darkness wrapped in rituals, cloaked in lies, fueled by silence. She left the hut with fire in her breath. As she traveled back toward the village, strange signs appeared. The river ran red for 2 days straight. The cattle refused to eat. Children screamed in their sleep. The winds carried strange voices, chants that didn't belong to the living. People spoke of nightmares, of seeing Duma in visions, dressed in black feathers and crowned in smoke. Balinol moved like a shadow among them. She stayed hidden, watching. She found her mother one evening at the edge of the maize fields. Lindai was thinner now. Her eyes carried more sorrow than before. When she saw Balinol, she nearly fainted. My child, you've returned. Balinol embraced her. We don't have much time. She explained everything. The woman in the forest. The ritual. The coming blood. At first, her mother couldn't believe it. But then she remembered the chants Duma had whispered late at night. The times he had vanished without saying where. The way he spoke of becoming greater than the gods. We must stop him, Lindai said. Together, they prepared. Quietly. Carefully. Balinol could not risk Duma knowing she was alive and walking. She had to strike at the right time. When the harvest moon rose full and round, she would be waiting. That night, she returned to Mazembe for one final gift. I'm ready, she said. Mazembe didn't speak. She brought out a gourd filled with dark liquid. This will show you the truth. But it will hurt. Balinol drank. She fell into a trance, visions flooding her mind. She saw Duma standing before the sacred stone, chanting in an ancient tongue. She saw her own body laid out on a cold slab, bones broken, heart still beating. She saw Kuda, the old god of storms, awakening beneath the soil, roaring with hunger. Then she saw herself, standing tall, wrapped in lightning, her feet planted firm. She woke with a scream, gasping. Mazembe helped her stand. Now you know what you must become. The time had come. Balinol dressed in bark cloth and painted her face with ash. She tied the cowrie shells around her wrist and carried the mirror in a small bag at her waist. She looked in the river and saw not the broken girl, but a woman born of fire. I'm coming, she whispered. And the storm walks with me. The harvest moon rose like a bleeding eye in the sky, swollen and full of silent warnings. In the heart of the village, people gathered in their brightest clothes, humming songs passed down from generations, unaware that something ancient was stirring in the soil beneath their feet. They thought it was a time of blessings, of ripe maize and full baskets. But far from the music and firelight, Balinol moved through the shadows, every step a vow. The sacred stone stood beyond the edge of the village, where the ground sloped and cracked. It was an altar once used only by the ancients, now forgotten by many, but not by Duma. He had prepared the place in secret, placing bones of owls, black feathers, and bits of hair wrapped in cloth along its edges. He had spent years planning for this night, and now, dressed in leopard skin, his eyes glowing with something otherworldly, he stepped into the clearing. He raised his arms to the moon. A low hum escaped his throat, deep and pulsing like a drumbeat. Hidden behind a thick tree, Balinol watched. She was not alone. Lindai crouched beside her, her face pale but firm. In her hands, she carried a small calabash filled with river water blessed by Mazembe. Balinol held the cowrie shells tight around her wrist, their tiny edges digging into her skin. As the chant rose, the ground began to tremble. A crack opened beneath the stone, and black smoke hissed upward. Duma threw something into the smoke, what looked like a strip of cloth. Balinol gasped. It was a piece of her dress. The one she had worn on the night her legs were broken. He still had it. Now. Balinol whispered. She stepped out from behind the tree, her legs shaking, not from pain, but from the weight of what was about to happen. Duma turned at the sound of leaves crunching. At first, he didn't recognize her. Then his eyes widened. You, he whispered. Balinol stepped closer. You broke my body, but not my spirit. He laughed, a low, bitter laugh that crackled like firewood. You should be dead. But I'm not, she said. And you're not a god. You're a coward. He lunged forward, but as soon as his feet touched the edge of the altar, he stopped. His body stiffened. The cowrie shells on Balinol's wrist glowed faintly. She raised her hand. Your power feeds on lies and silence. But tonight, I speak. Tonight, the truth is louder than your chants. The smoke thickened behind him, and a shape began to rise, a shifting mass of wind and bone, with eyes like burning coals. It was Kuda, the storm god. But it was confused. Balinol stepped closer, her voice firm. You were tricked, Great One. He offered me to you, but I did not go willingly. My blood was not pure with submission. It burned with rage. Kuda's face twisted, its form uncertain. He broke my legs, but not my will, she said. Lindiu stepped forward and poured the blessed river water onto the altar. The smoke sizzled. Kuda shrieked, a sound like wind tearing through trees. Duma screamed. No. You ruin everything. He tried to run, but the earth beneath him split open. Vines shot up, wrapping around his ankles, pulling him to his knees. The spirit hovered above him now, confused, angry, listening. Balinol opened the mirror given to her by Mazembe. She held it high, catching the moonlight. Look, she whispered. See who truly called you. The mirror glowed. In its reflection, Kuda saw Duma not as a devoted servant, but as a liar, a man who harmed the innocent to gain power. The spirit roared. Wind howled through the forest, tearing leaves from trees. Lightning split the sky. And then the smoke turned on Duma. It swallowed him slowly, wrapping around his body like a second skin. He begged, he screamed, but no one came. Then he was gone. The ground closed. Silence. Balinol dropped to her knees, exhausted. Lindiu ran to her, holding her tightly. It's over, she said. No, Balinol whispered. It's only beginning. They returned to the village at dawn. People stared in shock. She had left broken, silent, cursed. She returned strong, walking, wrapped in symbols of spirit and strength. The elders gathered. Lindiu told the story. So did Balinol. There were witnesses, those who saw the sky split, who heard the scream that came from the forest. And the spirits? They were silent now. Balinol became something different to the villagers, not just a survivor, but a warning, a memory, a protector. Children whispered her name like a charm. Women came to her with their pain. Men avoided her eyes. The sacred stone was never visited again. But sometimes, on nights when the wind howled too loud, people remembered the girl who walked with a limp and stared down a god. Balinol returned to Mazembe's hut weeks later. I did what I had to do, she said. Yes, the healer replied. And now you must teach others how. Balinol smiled for the first time in years. Her legs still hurt. Her past still echoed. But now, her steps were her own. The sky had shifted since the night the altar swallowed Duma. The clouds no longer lingered heavy over the village, and even the wind sounded softer, as if something old and angry had finally gone to sleep. But from Balinol, rest was not so simple. The fire inside her had not faded. It had changed. It no longer burned to destroy, it burned to rebuild. She sat beside Mazembe's hut, grinding herbs under the sun. Her hands moved with a steady rhythm, her face calm. Children watched her from a distance, whispering. They had heard their mothers say her name while lighting candles. They had heard their fathers fall quiet when her name came up near the fire. Balinol, the girl who walked into darkness and came back with lightning. A group of women arrived at the hut. One had bruises under her eyes. Another held a baby that wouldn't stop crying. They came not for medicine, but for guidance. Mazembe nodded toward Balinol. She will see you now. At first, Balinol hesitated. She was not a healer. She was not a priestess. But when the first woman knelt before her and said, "I need to know how to live again," Balinol understood. She listened. She didn't rush them. She didn't try to fix their pain with words. Instead, she gave them what she had been denied for so long, belief. She believed them. She gave them kauri bracelets, told them where to go in the forest when they needed to cry, taught them to walk barefoot in the river, to speak their pain aloud. And then one day, Mazembe brought her a scroll. It was old and wrapped in lion skin. "This," the healer said, "is the record of the bone circle." Balinol frowned. "What is that?" Mazembe's eyes turned serious. "A group of women warriors who once protected villages from dark spirits. Not with weapons, but with spirit and knowledge. They were feared. They were wiped out long ago. But not all memory of them was lost." Balinol opened the scroll. There were names written in red earth ink. Names of women long forgotten. And at the bottom, a space left blank. "You want me to lead this?" she asked. "I want you to awaken it." So she did. The bone circle was reborn quietly. It started with 5 women. They met in secret beneath the talking tree at the edge of the forest. They painted symbols on each other's backs with ash and oil. They shared stories, of pain, of betrayal, of rage. And when the stories were done, they burned them, letting the wind carry the ashes. Each woman swore an oath, to protect the broken, to uncover hidden cruelty, and to never again remain silent. Word of the bone circle spread like smoke through the village. Some mocked them. Called them witches. But then a young girl who had been beaten disappeared, and returned 3 days later, unharmed, her abuser gone from the village. People whispered. Then a widow found gold buried beneath her hut, a treasure long stolen from her by her late husband's brother. People whispered louder. And when an elder tried to silence a girl who had accused him of dark things, he fell ill overnight, plagued by visions of fire and screaming women. After that, the whispers stopped. The bone circle wasn't just legend anymore. It was law. One afternoon, Balinol sat beneath the river tree with Lindiwe. The water lapped softly at their feet. "You're not the same girl I pulled from that hut," Lindiwe said. Balinol nodded. That girl didn't know her own power. Now she does. Lindiwe looked down. "Do you ever wish it never happened? That you had a normal life?" Balinol didn't answer right away. She watched the sun shimmer on the water. "I used to," she said quietly. "But not anymore. What I went through, it made me dangerous. But it also made me see. I see pain in others now, the kind no one else notices. I speak the things others stay quiet about. And I can't undo my past. But I can make sure it doesn't repeat in someone else's future." Lindiwe smiled. "You sound like Mazembe now." They both laughed. Later that evening, a drum sounded in the distance. Balinol stood up sharply. "That's a warning drum." The two women ran toward the sound, their feet flying over the earth like whispers. At the edge of the village, a young boy stood trembling. "They took her," he cried. "They took my sister." "Who?" Balinol asked. "The men from the outer lands. Traders. They said they wanted to buy goats. But they took her instead." Balinol's jaw tightened. The bone circle gathered. They lit no torches. They spoke no words. They moved like wind. By dawn, the traders' camp was empty. All that remained were footprints leading away, and in the center of the ashes, a circle of cowrie shells. The girl was returned. She said nothing of what happened. But her hands shook less after that. The chief of the village called from Balinol. He offered her land. Gold. Titles. She refused them all. "I do not want to be honored," she said. "I want girls to stop disappearing. I want silence to stop being a shield for monsters." He nodded slowly. "You are no longer just Balinol," he said. "You are the wind that changes direction." She left without replying. That night, she sat alone beneath the stars. She opened her old journal, the one she had hidden in Mazembe's hut. She read the words she had written when she could barely speak. When every breath was pain. Then she wrote a new sentence. "I am still standing." The days blurred into weeks, and with each passing day, Balinol felt herself becoming more and more a legend. Her name, once spoken in fear, was now whispered with awe. She had become something more than just a woman who survived. She was the embodiment of justice, an avenger who sought to right the wrongs of her past. But the shadows of her childhood still haunted her. They always would. She had thought that the Bone Circle, her new family of women, would fill the emptiness left by her father's cruelty, but there were times when the weight of everything she had lost threatened to swallow her whole. She missed the quiet comfort of Mazembe's hut, the steady hand of the healer guiding her through the darkness. She longed for the simple days when survival was her only concern. Yet, there was no going back. The past was a distant memory now, and the woman she had become could not afford the luxury of grief. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, a messenger came to her hut. A man, bent and breathless, with fear in his eyes. He had traveled from the outer village, where the river twisted like a snake and the trees grew tall and thick. "Balinol," he said, his voice trembling. "It's happening again. The men from the outer lands, they've come again." Balinol stood, the firelight casting long shadows across her face. The Bone Circle had grown, its roots spreading across the land like vines, but there were still dark forces at play. Forces that would not rest until they had broken what she had built. "Where are they?" she asked. "By the river," the man gasped. "They've taken another girl." Balinol didn't need to ask any more questions. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She knew what she had to do. The Bone Circle assembled without a word. Women from all corners of the village, all ages, all walks of life, stood side by side in the moonlight, their faces set with purpose. Balinol felt the weight of their eyes upon her, but she didn't falter. She was no longer the girl who had been broken. She was the one who would break the ones who had caused the pain. The journey to the river was quick. The men were camped near the water, laughing around a fire, their voices thick with arrogance. They had no idea that the women were coming. That their time was up. Balinol and her circle approached quietly, moving like shadows among the trees. They didn't need weapons, they had something far stronger, justice. The men didn't hear the approaching women until it was too late. By the time they stood, Balinol was already among them, her eyes burning with an anger that was as ancient as the land itself. "You think you can take what doesn't belong to you," she said, her voice low and steady. "But you were wrong." The men looked at her, confused at first, but their eyes soon widened as the women of the bone circle emerged from the shadows, each one holding a symbol of the land, the cowrie shell, the stone, the sacred herb. They surrounded the men, cutting off any escape. One of the men, taller and broader than the rest, stepped forward. He was the leader. Balinol could see the greed in his eyes, the hunger for power that had brought him here. He sneered at her, his lips curling with contempt. "You think you can stop us?" he scoffed. "We've been doing this for years." Balinol's gaze didn't waver. "You've been hiding in the shadows for too long. But the light has found you now." With a single motion, she raised her hand, and the women of the bone circle followed suit. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of the river and the earth, as if the land itself had awakened to join them. "You took what wasn't yours," Balinol said, her voice rising with power. "And now you will pay the price." The leader lunged at her, but he didn't reach her. Before he could take another step, the ground beneath him cracked, the earth splitting open as if to swallow him whole. The other men scrambled, but the women were already upon them, binding them with ropes made of vines, tying them to the trees as punishment for their crimes. Balinol stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the leader. He struggled against his bonds, but there was no escaping the justice that had arrived. "You are not the first to think you could take from us," she said, her voice as cold as stone. "And you will not be the last to learn that no one is above the law." She raised her hand, and the women of the bone circle began to chant. The sound was soft at first, but it grew louder, resonating in the earth beneath their feet. The leader's face twisted in fear as the chant filled the air, the power of the land vibrating through him. "You'll die here," he snarled. "No," Balinol said softly. "But you will wish you had." With a final word, the earth trembled, and the men were dragged to their knees. The leader's defiance crumbled, and he begged for mercy, but there was none to give. His fate had been sealed the moment he crossed the line. Balinol turned away, her heart heavy but resolute. The bone circle had done its work. As the sun rose, painting the sky with shades of red and gold, Balinol knew that the village was safe, for now. But she also knew that there would always be those who tried to take what wasn't theirs, who tried to break the women and the land. And for them, she would always be ready. "Do you see, Lindai?" she whispered, as the winds swirled around them. "This is only the beginning." And so, the bone circle continued to grow, its influence spreading far and wide, a force that would never be silenced, a power that would never be broken. The legend of Balinol, the woman who had broken free from her chains and fought for what was right, would live on long after her time. The days after the confrontation by the river were filled with quiet reverence. Balinol and her bone circle returned to their village, but the shadows that had once haunted her began to feel lighter, as if the weight of the past was being lifted piece by piece. The people, though still frightened by the power they had witnessed, began to see her in a new light. No longer was she just the woman who had been broken by her stepfather. She had become a symbol of justice, a protector of the innocent, and a force of nature in her own right. The village was in awe of what had happened by the river, but they also knew that Balinol had given them something greater than vengeance. She had shown them that they could stand together, that they too could fight for what was right, for what was sacred. The bone circle had become a family, a sisterhood that bound them all together. It wasn't just about fighting evil. It was about healing, about making the land whole again, about protecting the vulnerable. But peace, Balinol knew, was fleeting. As the weeks passed, whispers began to circulate again. A new danger loomed on the horizon, something darker than the men they had faced by the river. Word came from the villages in the north, of raiders, of men who sought to destroy the heart of the land and strip it of its power. These men had no honor. They weren't like the ones Balinol had confronted, they were much more dangerous. They were ruthless, driven by greed and a hunger for destruction. And they were coming. Balinol sat in the heart of her hut, the fire flickering low as the news weighed heavily on her shoulders. The bone circle had grown stronger, but this new threat was like nothing they had ever faced. This was not just a battle for survival. This was a battle for the soul of the land. "We must go to the sacred mountain," Balinol said, breaking the silence that had fallen over the group. "The spirits are restless. The raiders do not just seek power, they seek to desecrate what is sacred. And they will stop at nothing." The women nodded, their faces set in grim determination. The sacred mountain had long been a place of refuge for the people. It was where the elders had gone for wisdom, where the land's most ancient secrets were hidden. It was sacred ground, a place that could not be defiled. But Balinol knew that if these raiders were as powerful as the rumor suggested, they would not hesitate to desecrate the mountain, to strip it of its spirit and use it for their own twisted purposes. That night, the bone circle gathered beneath the stars, their hearts beating as one. Together, they would face the darkness. Together, they would protect the heart of their land. The journey to the sacred mountain was long and treacherous. The path wound through dense forests, across rivers swollen by recent rains, and up craggy hills that seemed to rise up from the earth like the jagged teeth of some great beast. But with each step they took, Balinol felt a strange energy coursing through her veins. It was as if the land itself was guiding them, urging them forward. When they finally reached the foot of the sacred mountain, the air grew heavy with the scent of earth and stone. The mountain loomed before them, its peak shrouded in mist, as though it were touching the very heavens themselves. But something was wrong. The air was thick with unease, as if the spirits had been disturbed, as if something dark had taken root within the mountain. Balinol stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the presence of the raiders, their dark energy tainting the very ground beneath her feet. But she also felt the strength of the land, the power of the spirits that had lived there for centuries. The land would fight back. It always did. The women gathered in a circle, their hands raised to the sky as they chanted ancient words, calling on the spirits of the mountain for protection. Balinol closed her eyes, her mind focusing on the energy around her. The wind stirred, a gust of air sweeping across the land as if the spirits were answering their call. But then, a shadow fell over them. The raiders had arrived. From the darkness of the trees emerged men, rough, wild-looking men, their eyes burning with malice. Their leader, a hulking figure draped in black, stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. His eyes locked onto Balinol's, and she could feel the intensity of his gaze, like a predator sizing up its prey. "So, this is the great avenger," he said, his voice low and mocking. "The one who thinks she can stop us." Balinol didn't flinch. She had faced worse. The pain of her past was a fire that had tempered her soul. This man was nothing. "I don't need to stop you," Balinol said, her voice steady, unwavering. "The land will stop you." The raider leader laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the mountain. "The land is ours for the taking, just like everything else." With a sudden, brutal motion, he raised his hand, and the men behind him drew their weapons. The bone circle stood firm, their feet planted in the earth as the raiders charged. But Balinol didn't move. She didn't need to. She raised her arms, and the ground trembled beneath them. The air crackled with energy as the spirits of the mountain awakened, roaring to life. The raiders froze in place, their eyes wide with terror. They had not expected this. The leader snarled, but it was too late. The mountain had answered. With a great roar, the earth beneath them split open, swallowing the raiders whole. Their screams echoed through the air, but the bone circle stood in silence, watching as the land consumed them. When the ground finally stilled, Balinol lowered her arms. The air was thick with the power of the spirits, but there was also a deep, quiet peace. The mountain had protected them. The land had protected them. Balinol turned to the women of the bone circle, her heart swelling with pride. They had done it. They had protected their home, their people, their land. And they had done it together. But there was still work to be done. The village needed them. The land needed them. And Balinol knew that her work was far from over. As they descended the mountain, Balinol looked back one last time, feeling the power of the land surge within her. She had faced darkness and come out the other side. And no matter what the future held, she would always stand strong. She would always protect the land. And she would never, ever let her people fall again. The days following the destruction of the raiders were filled with change. Balinol's name had spread far beyond the village. The legend of the Bone Circle, the women who stood together, unbroken by the trials of the world, echoed through the surrounding lands. The people now looked to Balinol not only as a warrior but as a guide, a protector of the people, a woman who had faced unimaginable suffering and turned it into strength. But the world was never at peace for long. The whispers of danger never fully ceased, and the people of the village, though grateful, lived in the shadow of uncertainty. Even the spirits of the sacred mountain seemed restless, as if waiting for the next trial to come. Balinol knew that the peace they had found was fragile. She could see the way the villagers looked at her, almost with a sense of reverence and awe. She had given them hope, yes, but hope, she knew, was a fleeting thing. It required constant vigilance. She stood at the edge of the village one evening, looking out at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange. In the distance, the river that had been a site of so much pain and bloodshed now flowed peacefully, as though it too had healed. It was there, standing alone, that the realization hit her. She had fought for so long, not only for herself but for the land, for the people. And now that the battle seemed to have come to an end, she wondered what the future held for her. The women of the Bone Circle had become her family, and the village her home. But the land was vast, and there were still many places that needed healing, many more who needed protection. "I have done what I came here to do," she whispered to the wind, the spirits of the earth swirling around her, as if listening. But there was more to be done. Balinol knew in her heart that she couldn't stay forever. The village would thrive, yes, but the world was wide, and there were others who needed to hear the stories of resilience, of power in the face of adversity. She couldn't be a mere legend. She had to become something more, something greater. Her journey had begun with vengeance, but it had transformed into something far deeper, a mission to protect the vulnerable, to heal the broken, and to show the world that even in its darkest corners, light could still exist. The wind picked up again, its whispers urging her forward. She felt the pull, the call of something greater than herself. The village could survive without her. The Bone Circle had grown strong. The people would remember her, not as the woman who had been broken, but as the woman who had risen. Her journey would continue, but this chapter, this battle, was over. That night, Balinol gathered the Bone Circle, the women who had been her warriors, her sisters in arms. Together, they sat beneath the stars, the fire crackling in front of them. The mood was somber, but it was also filled with understanding. They had fought their battles, and now it was time for something new. "I'm leaving," Balinol said quietly, her voice steady, but tinged with sadness. "There are others out there who need me, who need all of us. Our work is far from over." The women nodded, their faces filled with acceptance. They knew that Balinol had always been destined for more than just this village. She had been a beacon of hope, and now it was time for her to light the way for others. One by one, the women came to her, touching her hands, offering their blessings. They knew that this was the right path, even if it meant losing their leader, their sister. But Balinol's heart was full. She had made a difference. She had healed the land, and she had healed herself. The scars of her past, the brokenness she had once felt, no longer defined her. She was stronger than ever before. Before she left, Balinol stood in the center of the village, looking at the people who had once seen her as broken, as a victim. They were different now. They were no longer afraid. They were stronger, their hearts filled with courage. They had seen the power of unity, of standing together, of taking action against evil. Balinol stepped to the edge of the village, her back straight, her head held high. She turned one last time to the people who had embraced her, to the land that had given her strength. "I will return," she promised. "Not for vengeance, but to protect. To help." The land will never be forgotten. And neither will you. With that, she turned and walked into the night, the moonlight illuminating her path. The bone circle would continue their work, and Balinol would travel to places where her strength was needed. The world was vast, and there was much left to do. But she knew she had done the most important thing. She had shown the world that there was power in pain, and strength in survival. She had given the people hope. As she walked into the night, the whispers of the land followed her, a gentle reminder that her journey had only just begun. And the village would always remember her, as the woman who had not only taken revenge but had transformed her suffering into a force for good, leaving a legacy that would echo through the ages.